All right, well, we'll get kicked off here. First, thank you to all of you who have made the time to join our webinar today, particularly knowing your schedules are full and extra time is a challenge to find. We are excited to dig into the organizational literature to provide a greater understanding and discussion of team dynamics. My name is Elizabeth Duggan. I'm an associate professor and the director of professional development and faculty engagement at the Department of Anesthesiology and Perioperative Care at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. I have a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology, and as a student, I was sufficiently lucky to work with Dr. Neal Outland, an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Georgia and an expert in teamwork. Dr. Outland's work expertise includes team composition, team dynamics, and computational methods. Partnering, we seek to apply teams research to better understand healthcare teaming, to teach, train, and coach providers to more effectively impact team outcomes, and additionally grow workplace team conditions that drive purpose and meaning, with the ultimate goal to engage physicians, build team potency, and improve team performance. Today, we're going to discuss 5 learning objectives. We'll focus on the varied approaches to teams research, discuss the integral role of ABCs on potency and performance, identify the complex factors both impacting and indicating effective teamwork, and finally discuss the conditions required to define teams. There are various approaches to teams research, all of which are being increasingly explored to determine their relationship not just with team performance, but with a concept labeled team potency. Both traditional research domains, as well as more modern findings, demonstrate that these 4 facets are integral to our understanding of team dynamics, particularly the newer concept of team potency, which acts as an outcome in itself, but also an activator of team performance.
So teams perform at their best with high potency. However, it appears we've taken the promise of what teams can do and expected it to come naturally, as if teams are some sort of magical work unit. So let's dive into our first myth of the lecture, that teams are the quintessential and magical work unit. When we look across some of our fastest growing and most impactful industries of the 21st century, all of these disciplines rely on teamwork, generally at unprecedented scales. These industries are close to our daily lives. Their work, their products, and developments undoubtedly impact us, and they all rely on successful teamwork, specifically on building and maintaining potent teams. But not all teams achieve this magical level of performance. So why does potency matter? It's really foundational to ensuring that teams maximize how they think, how they feel, and how they act. So team potency is this conduit to team performance. It provides the impetus for individuals to engage with the collective. Now, since it's this activator, without it, team dynamics lose luster. We see inhibitions to team performance. In fact, a fundamental mistake made by organizations when attempting to build teams is overlooking potency perceptions. If we overlook this conduit, we ignore how members feel about working in a team, and we fail to consider that team effort and resilience are supported. We definitely can't expect individuals to work towards team success. So the value proposition in this case of teams stems from teams' ability to produce more than the sum of what the individuals contributing singularly would. So without team potency, we lose this value, sometimes resulting in situations where it would have been better to have the work done by an individual. So take, for example, a study done recently with NASA Hera crews. So Hera crews are in a simulated space environment where they have limited contact with outside of the team for a month. So during their isolation, they complete decisions as a team, such as deciding upon navigation routes. And in many of these discussions, teams made less optimal decisions than their best performing member. So individuals do not always perform poorly compared to teams. It's generally when teams are not operating well, when they lack potency, that we see an individual potentially outperform the collective. But when teams are functioning well, they can create products that were previously unimaginable. So Steve Jobs noted in his reflections that he was most proud of Apple because the people formed a highly productive and potent team. Best said by Steve Jobs himself, making a product is hard. Building and sustaining a team is harder. More and more companies recognize that great teams are the engine for future performance. For example, over the last 30 years, Fortune 500 companies have been increasing the degree to which they rely on teams for their most crucial decisions. And like Fortune 500 companies, healthcare today faces a variety of intricate and challenging dynamics, which calls for the need of teams. In fact, as problem complexity increases, so does the difference in performance of individuals and teams. So using varied perspectives and experiences, teams demonstrate greater potential to identify and develop creative solutions. Teams are more flexible and responsive to change due to the behavioral repertoires that are present in each member. And finally, teams can shift the workload across members to help monitor and correct performance in real time. So diving deeper into this magic, we also see the power of teams creating the highest impact science. So while this work is primarily grounded in conventional knowledge combinations of prior work, knowledge features that include unusual or novel combinations see increasing returns. So while novel combinations of prior work are rare, teams are 37.7% more likely than solo authors to create novelty in their topic domains. And papers like this, combining novel integration of existing knowledge, are twice as likely to be highly cited. And this effect extends across industries. So in traditional sciences, in medicine, even in the science of studying teams, the work is most effectively done with teams. Now, admittedly, if the science of team science didn't rely on teams, that might be a problem. But in either case, examining industries most responsible for scientific growth, fields introducing novel and innovative knowledge across the last decade, we see that teamwork has actually been the force driving that success.
Which means we must be doing something right. Each of us works on a variety of teams in the operating rooms, the ICUs, clinics, on research and education projects, quality improvement endeavors. To quote Eduardo Salas, a teams expert and leading researcher in healthcare environments, teams have become a national obsession, with providers and administrators alike seeking to build and optimize teamwork across the healthcare domain.
But are you really working in a team? Or are you working as a group? Think of these arrows as the way that work moves through a team. Teams require interdependence, meaning that the arrows move across nodes bidirectionally and in non-repetitive patterns. So in intensive interdependence, it's nearly impossible to trace the contributions of each individual as leading to a particular outcome. So when teams work with high interdependence, we see three major factors that help us evaluate and observe team functioning. Commonly referred to as the ABCs of teamwork, research has repeatedly demonstrated that member affect, behaviors, and cognition are integral components of team building. Without these, teams cannot be potent, and teams that lack potency cannot effectively perform. So when acting as a member of a healthcare team, consider the following questions to better determine if you are working on a team or working as a group. First, do all of the members believe you are in a team? Do you believe that membership in this team increases the probability of success? Does your work depend on smooth integration of behaviors? Or more importantly, do you have to routinely work to get on the same page?
Reflecting on the answers to these questions, we turn to the magic of teamwork, the ABCs, affect, behavior, and cognition. Team affect is integral to team potency. When membership builds professional identity and enhances self-esteem, teams demonstrate increasing potency. On the other hand, when members of the team establish themselves as individuals instead of as a teammate, or when the team experiences negative emotions working together, teams fail. It is imperative then to consider two key indicators of affect when building, coaching, and augmenting teams: trust and motivation. Trust is the expectation that another will perform a particular action important to the truster, irrespective of our ability to control the trustee. It is defined by two components: cognitive and affective trust. Trust allows us to allocate our energies towards a common goal and is critically important because teams without trust tend to operate and act in ways that benefit their own self-interest. This means that team formation is highly dependent on trust to overcome that ambiguity of the future. Examining a meta-analysis published in 2016, including 112 studies and 7,600 teams, trust across all team types strongly and positively correlates with performance. Additionally, and apropos to medicine, trust explains greater variance in performance when task interdependence is high and teamwork interactions are critical for accomplishing a team goal. Temporary teams, those with structures that mimic operating room or procedural suites with limited group familiarity, focus primarily on narrow behaviors needed to accomplish personal tasks. They spend less effort on the tasks that require interdependence. This self-task focus has been proposed to make trust-related issues potentially less salient and hence less likely to affect team interactions. However, when this hypothesis was examined, the relationship between trust and performance did not vary by temporal stability. Trust is important in all team-related scenarios. Examining trust then, we see that it acts as both an antecedent to team potency, but also it activates motivation. In situations where trust is low, are we motivated to work with or be vulnerable to the actions of others? Are we willing to share team rewards? When are we motivating unanticipated or undesired outcomes? And this brings us to myth 2. Individual rewards facilitate team motivation. When we work in mixed motive teams, meaning we are neither rewarded nor held accountable together, we are less likely to cooperate to achieve a common goal. In these situations, team members are often driven towards individual rewards. And while we often think of a reward as financial compensation, rewards can include a tremendous variety of outcomes: promotion, recognition, time, power, status, work meaning, connection. Similarly, if the consequences of poor performance impact one team member exclusively or result in more severe consequences for one member than others, individuals are more likely to engage in defensive actions aimed at protecting themselves against possible harm by others. This consumes valuable resources that could otherwise be spent on team goal attainment. Justice conditions motivate employee behaviors. Distributive justice, the first of 3 types of organizational justice, is based in equity theory, which states that individuals' perception of fairness are determined by an evaluation of their own input-output ratio in comparison to the input-output ratio of others. If the ratios match, the employee considers the distribution to be equitable. If our input-output ratio is deemed less than our work peers, we may consider the distribution of rewards or consequences to be unfair. And while daily we may not calculate the exact value of our input-output ratio, we do perceive injustice conditions. And in the setting of injustice, we are not motivated to work with or on the behalf of others, which is counterproductive to team performance. Likewise, we consider 2 other forms of justice when we evaluate our workplace. Procedural justice is our evaluation of the processes and actions used to make decisions. Interactional justice represents our appraisal of employee treatment, including the interactions we experience with both leadership and colleagues, and the information we are provided about our roles, jobs, and workplace decisions. The magic of motivation can often be traced back to our perceptions of justice. Examining a 2012 meta-analysis of 37 studies, 4,600 teams, and more than 50,000 individuals, justice strongly and positively correlates with affect, team behaviors, and team performance. It is strongly associated with our feelings. Our perception of the ways in which we are being treated by team members corresponds with team trust and motivation, and then our willingness to expend energy and resources to augment team outcomes. Being treated fairly is a critical driver of teams.
Seeing then that our interactions of our collegial interactions impacts team affect and performance, are there certain people that routinely make better teammates? Some people believe there are, and this brings us to myth number 3: effective teams are built from the right people. Now, examining specific characteristics of team members is a foundational area of teams research. This compositional approach focuses on what people bring to the table and examines how these attributes improve team potency and performance. But in 2012, Google embarked on this very large-scale initiative to study groups and teams. They codenamed it Project Aristotle after a quote attributed to the Greek philosopher: "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." So what Google sought to do was understand what characteristics of their work made some highly effective teams and others low performing or even dysfunctional. So studying everything from socialization activity to personality traits, individual educational backgrounds, none of these impacted team performance as previous research might have suggested. And so their research debunked one of the most common myths about teams, that there is a prototypical team member. So we know for any job, basic qualifications are going to be necessary. Teams are no different. Individual expertise and skills are necessary for an individual to succeed in any role, but they are really only minimum qualifications for teams. Focusing on only optimizing individual technical skills or job expertise is misguided. A team of experts is not an expert team. What teams need to succeed are members who can collaborate to smoothly contribute their expertise and successfully engage in interpersonal interactions. So these qualities such as agreeableness, the degree to which someone can maintain amicable relationships through poise and mutual understanding, helps team members be motivated towards positive social interaction, which is useful when they must adapt to one another to get things done. Additionally, preference for teamwork is a quality in which members understand the value of collectives to achieve work and are motivated to accomplish tasks as a team. And then finally, collectivism is a quality where individuals feel comfortable with mutual reliance and put needs of the collective above their own. So examining the data, actually 2 meta-analyses looking at personal attributes highlight the asymmetric nature of individual qualities on work outcomes. So while intelligence may be one of the strongest predictors of individual performance, the average intelligence of a team has only a moderate, small effect on team performance. Also, while agreeableness is virtually unrelated to individual performance, in teams, the average level of agreeableness is one of the strongest predictors of team success.
This cannot, however, be interpreted that team uniformity is required or even desired. Yet we do see that individual attributes like agreeableness contribute to team success. How do we reconcile this information, bringing us to myth number 4, diverse teams outperform homogeneous teams? Dependent on workplace conditions, there is both magic and myth when we interpret the impact of diverse teams on performance. Early teams literature did demonstrate that team homogeneity was initially associated with better team performance. Why? Because homogeneous groups, though stratified by race, gender, socioeconomic status, and background, were overly present in the workforce. They demonstrated effectiveness due to early shared familiarity. Team composition, the contribution of both superficial and deep diversity, most accurately predicts the variance in team performance when workplace conditions are also considered. The influence of diversity, the magic, is found when workplaces support open and inclusive environments, when the context and conditions increase perspective sharing and augment collective solutions. Diverse teams are powerful sources of innovation, creativity, novel solutions, and team success. In fact, perhaps more so than homogeneous teams. Diversity is a driver of team performance, but much like our individual colleagues can only exercise their authentic self in an inclusive workplace, teams must also build inclusive conditions to reach optimal potential.
And in striving for everyone to be their authentic selves, the most effective teams negotiate. They have a give and take to ensure the best application of the diversity in the team. So exercising their different behavioral repertoires, teams can smoothly integrate their skills to enhance their performance and to cooperate to contribute equitably with their unique knowledge, their skills, and the experience that they bring to the team. Now, through this give and take, teams have to demonstrate some sort of interpersonal flexibility to figure out how best to align their behaviors to achieve goals. The alignment of behaviors sort of coalesces into observable processes and what research identifies as the mediating mechanisms approach. So this approach stresses observable behaviors that teams demonstrate that we know lead to success. Now, the school of thought is really based in the idea that if teams can promote the right behaviors, they can increase effectiveness regardless of the individual team member composition.
Examining then the specific behaviors we do use to achieve team success, the types of work break down into task work and teamwork. The majority of healthcare providers are far better performers in the first realm. Most physicians minimally train for 7 to 10 years to successfully perform the needed functions of our jobs. Our skills are highly differentiated. We apprentice in hierarchical structures with clear authority levels. And for the most part, perhaps until recently, many physicians remained in their chosen profession and career for long time periods, providing the temporal stability needed to become experts at the task.
However, the strength of a group lies in those behaviors that help them to integrate across different knowledge and skill bases. So these are the processes facilitated by interdependence, by good leadership, and empowerment to be an authentic contributor, to not have fear of speaking up, fear of participating, or collaborating.
The recurring processes that occur across teams, those task and team processes we're talking about, have been described by Mark's taxonomy. Her working group gathered team literature and empirically and conceptually defined the processes that occur iteratively and cyclically in all teams. Each of these processes contributes to effective performance. Looking, however, at the division of these processes that they created, when you look at the behaviors and actions, processes that contribute to transition and action, physicians are far better trained to perform these tasks. We are not as well trained in those that engage constructive behaviors required for cross-temporal processes. Yet, those elements required in cross-temporal processes are foundational for optimal performance: communication, collaboration, coordination, decision-making, leadership, and participation. These are heavily emphasized in team training because they strongly influence team success. Examining specific behaviors and those that can be practiced on an individual level, we see tremendous overlap with social support activities. Using the support behaviors listed on the right builds cross-temporal processes listed on the left. Using these behaviors routinely offers team members and team leaders simple behavioral patterns to facilitate member output and amplify team performance.
Examining then our own behavioral patterns and the ways in which we can act to augment team processes, we move to myth number 5. Individuals tend to work in groups in a manner similar to their independent work behaviors. In fact, individuals do not necessarily behave in teams as they would as individuals in non-team environments. There are observable phenomena that emerge from the cascade of individual behaviors, and these act as indicators that the team may be detracting from their potential. So teams must consistently overcome natural tendencies of individuals, these acting as hidden subversions of team performance. Now, these pitfalls include exclusionary culture, poor expectation setting, or lack of accountability tracing. So, for example, teams may experience social loafing, which is a reduction in individual contributions due to expectations that their output won't be recognized. So when teams don't organize work such that everyone has a meaningful and accountable contribution, people may not put their best foot forward. Also, teams may face process loss. Now, process loss is similar to social loafing in that teams are not able to perform to their ultimate potential. But the difference is that process loss is caused by obstacles due to poor team interaction. So for example, teams that don't share information or poorly centralize their knowledge might make it difficult for individuals to access that knowledge or to understand the decisions that have been made by the team. Additionally, we see performance matching, and this is where members fail to contribute based on what they perceive from others. So it's really a matching of their performance levels to what they see in the rest of their team members. And finally, we have production blocking, where contributions may be inadvertently, but sometimes purposefully blocked by the behavior of others. For example, work by multiple researchers have demonstrated that teams routinely have uneven distributions in speaking time, often being dominated by just one or a few of their members.
So the magic of teams then exists when we take on the process of norming expected and successful behaviors together. In fact, as early as 1969, Schein posited that team processes require competent interpersonal interactions and that the team members themselves must be involved in describing, analyzing, and improving these relationships by agreeing upon and modeling successful behaviors. For instance, as illustrated by this quote from a recent study on intraoperative teams published in the Annals of Thoracic Surgery, when work groups do not share behavioral values or define optimal behaviors, member satisfaction declines, support behaviors decrease, trust falters, and the team loses motivation and self-identity. High-performance work teams can be examined and differentiated along the dimensions of their norming to establish joint purpose and acceptable behaviors. Following team formation, the new team often sets and resets their values. Group members engage their energies and resources to manage uncertainty and anxiety rather than focusing on their regular tasks. Consequently, performance outcomes may drop. This is expected in high-performing teams. But for organizations unfamiliar with norming and closely monitoring progress, the drop in performance is oftentimes met with organizational intervention. This in itself cues the group that their norming process is failing and may lead to team breakdown. For the patient organization, however, as the group acquires more information, they begin to set expectations, define roles, reduce uncertainty, and align responsibility with agreed upon changes. This keeps communication lines open, and we also see that members then participate in joint decision-making. Outcomes show an upward trend as teams begin to use their new behavior norms to improve performance. Largely important in behavioral norming is the approach team members use to manage conflict. Decades of team research has examined types of conflict, most commonly task, relationship, and status, to determine their impact on team performance. Task conflict, defined as differences in ideas, opinions, and viewpoints about task content, initially demonstrated no impact on team performance. However, in teams where task conflict is managed effectively, in other words, it does not lead to relationship or status conflict, it is positively associated with team performance. As might be expected, relationship conflict, defined as those tensions and personal incompatibility we experience over beliefs, values, and habits, negatively impacts team performance. And likewise, status conflict, the argument over who has power and decision-making authority, also associated with poor performance. So how do we then, as team members, facilitate task conflict, which can be good for team performance, without creating or augmenting relationship or status conflict? Effective team norming builds constructive conflict management behaviors. Teams should come to view task conflict as positive and part of the process required for superior performance. Norming serves to offset the negative feelings that can otherwise occur with disagreement. Norming styles that are more collective, that encourage open discussion, constructive analysis, and strategic collaboration are positively associated with team performance and the ability to manage conflict.
So conflict is inevitable in teams, but it often stems from differences in individual thinking. So the C in the ABC model refers to this third component of factors required to achieve team potency: shared conceptualizations that teams have about their relevant team factors. So these are called shared mental models, and they reflect the degree to which information is shared across team members. This is our sense of being on the same page. Task mental models facilitate a shared interpretation of the environment and the tasks expected of each member. Teams that have a shared conceptualization of the task are better able to align their work quickly and seamlessly. Teamwork mental models are the shared expectations of member social interaction and support behaviors. So teams sharing effective mental models overall know what's expected of them to be a good team member, and allows each of them to have a better understanding of others' contributions and also anticipate what others might be needing. Now, on their own, each type of mental model is useful and important to be shared. However, when members both know what will be done and how best to interact, they can leverage their inputs to improve performance even more. Finally, although the shared nature of mental models aligns members' expectations and behaviors, it doesn't mean the team has found the optimal path to interacting. Accuracy of these mental models is even more important and an even stronger predictor of team performance than the sharedness. When teams agree upon what needs to be done and how to do it, they should be seeking the optimal mental model, one that often provides competitive advantage. And building this level of cognitive structures across members definitely takes time, but it's worth the time to uncover and develop these mental models.
Teams who develop their own shared mental models are building this pool of knowledge and experience to execute team goals. The process by which these models develop successfully critically must include trust and psychological safety among members, behavioral norming, and inclusive thinking. When an optimal mental model is applied to working conditions, much as Dr. Outland mentioned, it offers the team a significant performance advantage. The team is better able to cope with difficult and changing tasks. They more quickly overcome ambiguity, and they constructively manage conflict without harm to personal relationships. These teams are more facile because they are better able to predict what other team members are going to do, which facilitates communication, enables members to seek and ask for help, and draws on team expertise without expending new resources.
So given the power then that shared mental models, we see organizations often promote the use of teams as a way to decrease biased thinking that can impact the individual team members. And that leads us to the exact same myth that teamwork is more likely than individual effort to detect and minimize biased thinking. Now, unfortunately, there are situations where team cognition actually detracts from performance, such as in group polarization and escalation. Now, for polarization, teams can become entrenched and unflinching, a tendency that naturally occurs in groups. And so this results in decisions that might be extreme. And it represents a lack of flexibility and negotiation on part of the team. We see either or scenarios instead of finding middle ground. Now, group escalation, on the other hand, stems from group overconfidence. So when the team pours deeper into what may be a losing cause or a wrong decision, because they feel that the team couldn't possibly have been wrong in their initial thinking and their decision making. Now, this is when a strong belief in the team actually causes rigidity.
When members then poorly calibrate their cognitive modeling, persuasion, conformity, and individual motivation may lead to cognitive models that lead to poor or even dangerous outcomes. Groupthink is the phenomena that occurs when norming prioritizes conformity, group identity, and collective rationalization over objective analysis. This is distinct from process loss or social loafing because this behavior stems from an immensely positive belief in the team. Overly cohesive groups tend to accept a viewpoint or conclusion that represents a perceived consensus, regardless of whether the group members believe it to be valid, correct, or optimal. Norms that act to inhibit self-expression build safety for an in-group, those working to promote the consensus, while simultaneously cultivating deleterious effects on others. Think tanks are the opposite mode of cognition. They are an example of intellectual and cognitive discourse that is generated specifically to seek solutions to identified problems. Team mental models that define think tanks correlate strongly with psychological safety, learning environments, information sharing, intellectual diversity, and equitable participation. Psychological safety is being able to express oneself without fear or implication of negative consequences. For those of you familiar with Amy Edmondson's work, specifically examining psychological safety in healthcare teams, it describes one's perception of taking an interpersonal risk in a workplace environment. Most often, the sense of safety is provided by a direct supervisor or a team leader, but it also results from other workplace experiences, including collegial relationships and workplace norms. Behavioral norming, again, that encourages inclusiveness, perspective sharing, and task conflict promotes psychological safety and team engagement.
So when it comes to team cognition and decision-making, norming must encourage and sometimes even require disagreement. This is impossible without psychological safety. And so team members need to know that they will not be punished for sharing their thoughts, being wrong, or otherwise engaging with the team if their engagement is in fact genuine. You never want to have a situation where people are afraid to contribute or put everything they have into team success. In the years since Amy Edmondson's seminal work, meta-analyses have demonstrated strong correlations between psychological safety and both team and individual outcomes. When individuals experience psychological safety, they perform better. They engage in more learning behaviors, they share more information with others, they exhibit higher levels of engagement, and are often more satisfied with their jobs. Similarly, when teams agree that there's a psychologically safe environment, they also perform better. They engage more with each other, they share more information between their members, and they're generally more satisfied with their work.
Seeing the relationship then between psychological safety, team affect, and behaviors, we have more clarity regarding its role in cognition. Psychological safety offers teams the opportunity to generate accurate and shared cognition, impacting team potency and performance. Josette Gevers, a prominent teams researcher, examined 37 teams, each with an average of 9 members and mean team longevity of 32 weeks. Measuring team cognition at a single point in time predicts both team potency and performance. Gevers, however, also revealed that cognition does not predict potency in static fashion, but found that as cognition increases, its impact on team potency and performance also increases. We are more motivated, we are more potent when we participate in and experience the process of growing team cognition, which we know can only be done in a setting of psychological safety. Transactive memory systems represent the second component of shared team cognition. Effective teams divide and stockpile the knowledge needed to complete a task, and this allows each individual to effectively store and retrieve the specialized information most needed to accomplish their immediate work tasks. Transactive memory systems are most often utilized in teams who have a variety of specialized knowledge. In medicine, we build an understanding of which members of our team know what information so that we can most effectively retrieve knowledge from one another and also capitalize on each other's task experience. To demonstrate this, a simple training experiment was done that shows how training together can change our transactive memory systems. Realizing that training together across specialties, and particularly as we grow out of formal training and into being an attending or a faculty position, this is relatively rare, but it does enhance transactive memory. A training session was held to demonstrate and teach individuals to assemble an AM radio. A week later, the individuals returned and were asked to recall the assembly procedure. When subjects were placed back into the team with whom they originally trained, they recalled more about assembly and produced a better quality radio than those members whose training was separate from the repeat assembly team. Analyzing videotape of the sessions, the results indicate that group training improved performance primarily by fostering the development of transactive memory systems among group members. This is a critical take-home point for team training across medical specialties and has been emphasized by Edward Salas in his observation of healthcare team training. In his words, training is not a one-day event or somewhere that trainees simply go. Team training needs to occur in working teams such that the information learned and practiced in training can be transferred in the live environment. Drawing on meta-analytic data examining over 7,000 teams, all perform better when they develop transactive memory systems. Particularly important in healthcare, these memory systems demonstrate increasingly impactful associations with performance in socially diverse teams, in teams with low authority differentiation. For instance, when we team with our colleagues, none of whom holds an authoritative role over another. When we increase our temporal stability, right? Meaning we train and work together frequently, and notably when external interdependence is high, meaning our team success requires multiple other organizational members to contribute energy, knowledge, resources, and time to help us achieve our goal.
So, excuse me. So transactive memory systems represent the shared understanding of who knows what. No, better said, it represents teams having a map of where to go to access the knowledge, skills, or expertise that they need at any point in time. And these roadmaps can help, in healthcare, can be better utilized to map out the information that might be present in multiple teams. Now, social networks are this map, and they could be this map of who knows what and how. And they enable us to determine how information spreads, through whom, how quickly. And these people, these connectors, known as brokers or boundary spanners, facilitate exchange across members who might not otherwise interact. So we know that silos prevent information sharing and are counterproductive to teamwork. We want to build connections between individuals to help them find others who can add skills, expertise, or knowledge to move work forward. Now, understanding and utilizing social networks has the potential to notably impact teamwork, no matter where it is. But I think particularly for healthcare performance-based outcomes like safety or care delivery, practice efficiency, or even just satisfaction. So when providers are able to more quickly and accurately identify and facilitate these connections, the more likely they're going to be able to solve problems and optimize patient care. Now, the more links formed within a team or across teams or spanning these siloed units, the easier it'll be for individuals, teams, and organizations to retrieve these specialized skills and knowledge needed to perform on the wide variety of tasks that they have to accomplish. Now, building these expansive connections can really expand our team's capabilities. In this case, we'd be more extensively sharing information, sharing knowledge, building trust, and even norming together. And these connections are critical for improving team potency and performance. But the question becomes, can they overcome mediocre working conditions? And that brings us to the final approach to teams research that we're going to discuss today, and that's the conditional approach or the contextual approach. And this is an examination of environmental conditions that facilitate teamwork. So in 1964, McGrath advanced an input, process, output, IPO, framework for studying team effectiveness that has been the basis of teams research for more than half a century. Now, this model has been redefined and updated quite a bit, but its basic premise is that input factors enable and constrain members' interactions, and that these individual team member characteristics, competencies, personality factors, team level factors such as task structure or external leader influences, or finally organizational and contextual factors like organizational design, organizational structure, or environmental complexity. Now, processes describe how team inputs are then transferred or transformed into outcomes that matter to them. And these can be multiple outcomes. Broadly speaking, these are generally performance or members' affective reactions like satisfaction or commitment. But the key takeaway from this model is the nesting arrangement of the inputs. So in this model and subsequent models, they suggest that environmental and organizational contextual factors affect the nature of teams more than team member composition or team context. So the outer layers influence the inner layers more than the reverse. Now, this slide also rests on the premise that intact teams develop over time. So as teams mature, they undergo developmental processes that enable improved performance. They're able to learn from their mistakes. They repeat this iteration over and over that's required in teams as they perform over time, and they get the opportunity to improve with each performance episode.
Indicating that a meaningful evaluation of our team performance requires not only a careful critique of team ABCs and mediating processes, but also an analysis of our organizational conditions that facilitate and inhibit team processes. The most successful groups exist within an organization that foster the team's ability to enhance its own success. The listed factors here not only augment team achievement, but many of these act as antecedents to employee engagement, meaning we can double our positive outcomes when we set best conditions for our teams. When possible, encourage functional leadership over hierarchical leadership, use transformational and inclusive leadership styles, set clear vision, empower members to contribute, offer equitable participation opportunities, and ensure that members are provided voice, the ability to express their preferences and concerns. Organizations that can better foster autonomous and flexible team conditions build more innovative and creative teams, and above all, and perhaps most frequently missed in team training, provide team coaching. None of us learn to practice medicine in a day's training. Teams require education, practice, coaching, and feedback over time to reach their ultimate potential, to optimize team potency.
So conditions have been found to account for up to 40% of team performance. Richard Hackman proposed that there are 6 key conditions required to build effective teams. Now, these conditions are more complex than the previously discussed IPO model. However, they both point out the importance conditions play in building effective teams, and how without these conditions, teams may not achieve the performance that defines the magic. More importantly, many of these can be impacted before teams begin doing their work at all. So this allows proactive management of teams by getting them started on the right foot. So first, real teams believe they are a team, meaning they recognize, understand, and appreciate the interdependence, and believe that through working together, they'll be able to achieve a goal. Second, the goal must hold some sort of purpose for their team members. Compelling work motivates teams to act, and members have to believe that the goal is worth achieving and that the team can be the one to achieve it. Third, now as discussed, the team needs members with the right set of skills, meaning this combination of attributes among members combined can create something that's more than the sum of its parts. But this is more than just technical expertise. Next, clear and safe norms support healthy task conflict. They prevent conflict from devolving team member relationships, and these norms can define and model expected behaviors, ensuring that the team agrees upon actions, agrees upon how they're going to go about achieving their goals, including setting forth conditions of psychological safety. Now, organizational support is also wide-ranging and depends on the environment, the team needs, and the expected outcome. But when the organization cues, culture, and support do not match the expectations of the team, it's unlikely the team is going to succeed. And so finally, the highest performing teams do have access to team coaching. So coaches aid teams to better self-manage, to drive their own success, and versus working under some command and control framework that might have too much intervention. Now, the bidirectional interaction between the team and the coach allows the team to direct their changes and behaviors with an expert to guide and provide reflection.
Teams are complex. They require significant investment to build, develop, and optimize towards performance. Given this investment, it is imperative that leaders recognize that not all work requires teams. Before engaging in the required conditions and processes to build and develop a team, examine the work pattern required to achieve the outcome. Does the work require sufficiently high member interdependence that the output cannot be traced in time? If so, this is the magic. Specifically in complex environments, teams will outperform individuals. Set forth conditions first, those required for success, the ones mentioned just now by Dr. Outland. Engage members in team processes and be reminded that these processes are iterative and cyclical. It takes time to build trust, to norm expected behaviors, to set values, and to establish shared mental models and transactive memory. Performance may initially drop as teams set and reset their processes. However, high performers can and do accomplish tasks efficiently and creatively to deliver optimal results. As we become more familiar with team development and coaching, as we engage in the components that foster team ABCs, we will undoubtedly better serve our patients. Equally importantly, we will build organizations that foster and advance social support, justice conditions, psychological safety, inclusive environments, and a compelling purpose. All conditions demonstrated to improve team potency and performance, but also acting as antecedents to facilitate physician wellness, engagement, and career meaning. And with that, we appreciate your time. We're very excited to be here, and we can open up the discussion for questions. Okay. Well, we've got a couple here. Let's see. How can we apply these elements into a residency program, and how to retrain physicians in a residency program to have a team mindset? That's a great question. I might take the first one, and then Neal, I'll read the second one to you again. So applying these elements into a residency program, I think starts with us just rethinking the way we train our residents. I will openly admit, before I went back to get a master's degree in organizational psychology, a lot of these concepts were very novel. They were maybe somewhat obvious, but how to apply them, how to put them forth, how to actually train for them was not in my repertoire. So I think, we do the didactics of the education, and then very frankly, we continue to put as much emphasis on this type of interaction on these behaviors as we do a lot of the task training we have in a residency program. One of the things is really, then Neal, maybe you can comment on this, is how do you train people to have a team mindset?
Well, training is actually an interesting way of thinking about it. We can never force someone to think about or to have a particular orientation. But often what happens is where we get a lot of leverage is having people see the value. And I don't know how many opportunities are created to where you can see the value of the team, where the team is even appreciated, right? So celebrating the wins of a team, or even having the opportunity to practice and train as a team. I think a team orientation can be developed through these repeated interactions where they're able to see that it's not just their contributions or working as an individual that can have the biggest impact.
Yeah. We have a couple of comments that I'll read, and then I'll ask a question. So, someone has said that expertise is individual knowledge, but many of the areas we work in are teams. And I'll just emphasize, I think that is very true. But one point we really wanted to take away from this lecture is the difference between a team and a group. Because in healthcare, we use the word team so often, and I absolutely agree with this comment. We are in teams, but we're acting like groups, right? We are necessarily making kind of our work linear. You could trace out what I do in the operating room, perhaps compared to the surgeon, or even in some of my best kind of collaborative groups around education and quality care, right? We kind of parcel the work out in a way that we're not interdependent. So I think one thing we really need to think about is how can we be more interdependent with each other to make sure that we're acting as a group. We have a question from Dr. Farmer, a former resident of mine. What does the literature say about how to handle specific teammates who are consistently underperforming or having a hard time working with the rest of the team? Neal, do you want to kick that one on and then I can jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, as you've absolutely mentioned with norming, does the team member actually understand the expectations, and has the team agreed upon expectations that are actually within the realm of performance of all the team members? So, of course, it's really hard to diagnose this specific issue, but we've mentioned situations where, while the team is coming to a decision, we actually don't get everybody's contribution. We actually don't know how everybody feels. So if this team, say, has agreed upon performance standards that this person could not provide, then the team might have been set up for failure from that realm. And there's tons of ways that this could have come about. That's just one example. But it does have to do with expectations and whether or not those expectations can be realistically met. Also, can we leverage the resources in the team to maybe alter how we get to our goals so that we're not able to single out one individual as not contributing?
I think that's great. And then adding to that is, I think 2 points. The first was shines, right? That he said in 1969, which is exactly what I think Dr. Outland is saying, is that team members themselves have to set forth their own norming, right? So if you're not sitting down as a team, if you haven't had those discussions, oftentimes people don't know the impact of their behavior because their expectations of what is good for them is, separate than the group. And again, consider motivations, right? There may be really mixed motive teams, right? If I feel like I may be harmed by other behaviors, I may not care about integrating my behavior smoothly into the team. I'm more interested in myself. And then I think the last thing, and this is so prominent in medicine, is we really just have to think about the culture, right? Because if the team is really norming amongst themselves well, but you kind of continually have this problem, you have to ask yourself, is the organization cueing this person or this group of people to have a set of behaviors that doesn't norm with this team? Another question we have is, how do you create mandatory psychological safety? And this person asked in especially in emergency response teams, but Neal, have you ever worked with an organization that mandates psychological safety training?
I have not. Well, okay. So is this psychological safety training? I thought we were asking about
if you do, how do you create mandatory psychological safety training? So have you done that before?
No, I have not done that. That sounds very difficult to me.
Tell us why.
Yeah, so it's, how can we force someone to know that they're safe? Right, so it comes from the interactions, and I'm not sure that we actually need psychological safety training so much as we need psychological safety mechanisms in place to where people can share freely. So things that we've seen for group discussion, for fear of retaliation, for example, we have anonymous ways of saying, I disagree, or we have anonymous ways of pooling all of the information in the first place so that people don't know where something came from. And the teams are able to view it more as a problem to be solved, or really like a mystery to be solved, instead of a sort of problem or place to be entrenched between members. So for psychological safety, it's if the culture is not there, if the team cannot communicate that these interpersonal risk-taking is a safe thing to do, this is where organizational support could also shine again, by providing other avenues to where we could get the benefits of psychological safety.
And I think that leads right into kind of the question that comes next is, how do you change culture? So I will say the very first class I had in the INO program, I asked the program director that exact same question. That was my number one question. How do you change culture? Clearly, I think doctors are looking to change culture. And his response was somewhat disappointing. He said, it takes about 5 to 7 years. And the list of things you have to do was tremendously long. This is not to say we can't do it, but I think one, you have to be patient. Two, you have to have kind of a leadership group, work with a grassroots network to make it happen. And like Neal says, a lot of this can't happen through training. It has to happen through experience, right? Through those kind of one-on-one interactions, and then those team interactions and those organizational interactions. And they have to be repetitive. So culture can't change unless every time we work in an environment, we get to some degree the same output so that we believe that to be true. It's very difficult. And then what was also asked is, what about the current situation of travelers in all of these healthcare roles, right? These people that are kind of in and out of our teams. That by definition really does, unfortunately, hinder teams, because we're not establishing affect with someone who's an outsider immediately. They don't know how to norm in our behaviors. Now, again, they could be bringing better behaviors, but we're not knowing these things because we don't have time with them. And of course, I think one of the biggest hits we're seeing, and has been demonstrated in the healthcare literature with travelers, is we are losing transactive memory systems, right? We do not know where people are storing knowledge and how to retrieve it, and when and who to ask for help. And I think that is a really hard piece. Anybody else have other questions or other concerns, things they'd like to bring forward, discussion points? Okay. We have, is anonymous reporting psychologically safe? That's a great question. And I will let Neal talk about it, because he just taught me this term, which is psychological protection. And I would say, that's probably a little bit more of what that is. So, Neal, what's the difference for people that between psychological safety and psychological protection?
So with psychological safety, we're generally putting it in the hands of individuals, right? We're putting it in the hands of the teams, for the teams, or the individuals within the team, to operate in ways that communicate a particular perception, that support this idea that you can say things here, you can be wrong, and we're going to support you. It's not going to be a hit to your ego. We're not going to think that you lack competence. You won't be punished for being genuine. And we see across research, across time, we know that this is very difficult, right? Some people get it and then others won't. It only takes one person in a team that doesn't communicate that to make everyone else in the team not want to speak up, not want to contribute fully. When I think about psychological protection mechanisms, these are mechanisms where, we wouldn't retaliation so much harder, because you wouldn't know who you're supposed to be retaliating against, right? It's a way of getting information to the whole team from within the team in ways that doesn't facilitate the danger of the risk-taking that psychological safety is meant to overcome in the first place.
Okay, so we've also been asked to get a couple more. We'll keep talking maybe till like 5:05, but IARS friends, cut us off when we need to. So what about kind of redundancy in teams when we're providing this 24-hour coverage, right? Every single day of the week we have to team. Clearly that's impossible for all of us to be there all of the time. And so I think that has actually been explored. Teams that have temporal stability, it doesn't mean that everyone has to be there every time, but it means that you generally have to have the same group of people rotating in and out of teams most of the times. And so I think that's kind of the key. How that happens with physician shortages and the demands in healthcare, I think, is undoubtedly challenging. But I do think there's a lot of opportunity where we can really explore, and this is like a whole nother topic that I love, but explore kind of these autonomous scheduling systems where we can build our own teams and plug ourselves in and out of them so that we can work really well when we're there, but we also have very predictive scheduling so that we understand when we're in and when we're out. As kind of my thought to that. All right. Best manner to teach these concepts in healthcare. Lectures, games, weekly meetings, incentives. Neal, have you found anything? I mean, you did a lot of this with us. So what did you think was the highest kind of output teaching?
Ooh, I am a sucker for games, especially
I agree.
the higher fidelity they are, they give you so much leverage and discussion. So, people, they're like so close to it, right? So if you just finished playing this game, you can still access all the emotions you had during the game, all the thought that you had during the game. And to the extent that this game is a really good representation of even a general context that you'll be in later, then that reflection is what we need to understand how we might be able to do things differently. And luckily, the thing about games is then we can do it. We can put it immediately into practice. And this is something you don't get from lectures and maybe like case studies. So I am a huge sucker for games and live simulations.
And I think it works, having taken the class. I obviously got interested enough to just keep learning about this. Neal and I are also developing kind of a seminar where we're going to do 5 weeks worth of education for the same group of people and teams, and we're going to explore all of these. So I see somebody saying maybe we should disseminate this knowledge through perioperative journals. Yes, we hope we do. I think it would be fun to do this in a lot of different forums, but clearly we would love to have some of these questions answered by research and real teams. So that looks like the list of questions. We appreciate, there's a lot of really kind comments in this box. And I think that always warms your heart when you put some work into building a lecture and you really believe that some of this education can change outcomes for patients and providers alike. Some people have asked for recordings. A recording is available, I think tomorrow or the next day, for anyone who's an IARS member. You just go onto the member webpage and it will be there so you can watch it. If you're not a member, become a member. And then if you also would like anything else, feel free. My email is publicly available on the UAB website, and Neal's is also available on the UGA website. So it's easy to find us. Reach out. I'm happy to provide, any information that you need from the lecture. I think that's it. Thank you for participating this evening. We really appreciate it.